Hello, Lisa Tyndall here. Today we're going to look at the Module 3 Notes activity. So we will be working with single row functions. We'll be doing some conversions, some conditional expressions, and taking a look at using group by. Okay, so go ahead and download the notes.sql and then head over to Apex. I'm logged in here. I'm going to go into the SQL workshop. And you can see here, I've got my notes file open in VS Code. I'm going to have it present just off camera to copy and paste my solutions into. All right, so I'm going to go into SQL commands. And from my notes file, I can see that we're going to be making use of the OM model for this activity. So if you've drawn up an ERD of the OM model, good to have that kind of in front of you as we take a look at these problems. Okay, so first off, number one, we want to find the highest and lowest unit price, okay, in the items table, and then also the total number of items, okay, and give all three columns an appropriate title. So let's just start at the beginning. We know we're going to be working with the items table, so I'm going to just start with a quick select statement from the items table, see what we have to work with, and then we'll work on getting those min and max prices. So here we've got the unit price column, and we want to find the highest and lowest value that are in that column, okay? And we only have 10 rows. Make sure we don't have more than that. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my row return limit. Now in other languages or in other database management systems you may have encountered, you can use a limit clause here at the end of your select statement to indicate how many rows you want returned. In Oracle Apex, rather than having that limit clause available, they have this drop down for rows. So essentially I was saying limit 10 before and only getting 10 rows back. Now I've increased my limit to 20, but I'm still getting 10 rows back. So that tells me there's only 10 rows in the table. It looks like 13 should be our lowest value and 1795. Yep, looks like our highest value. Okay, so that's what I should expect to see when I find those minimum and maximum values. So to find those, I'm going to make use of functions. First, I'm going to find the lowest value, so I'm going to select the min value of the unit price column. Give that a go. All right, and it does give me back the value 13, which is what I expect. Now, the title of this column is not super friendly, so I'm going to give it an alias as we'll call it lowest price, and I'm going to include a space. That's why I've got the quotes there. Run that, make sure it still works. Sweet. All right. So next I'm going to add our highest price, and you guessed it, I'm going to use a function to do that as well. This time we're going to use max, which should find the highest value in the expression that I include in parentheses. So unit price is the column I want to look in. So that's my condition. And I'm going to call it highest price this time. All right, so I get my highest price as I expect, $17.95. Now remember, with functions, basically what functions are is predetermined code that executes elsewhere. So it can only execute on whatever I give it, okay? And it will expect certain values or certain kinds of values to be passed to it within, I call it the basket, the parentheses here that are taking those values to the code that will be executed elsewhere. So you need to make sure that you're including the proper data type, okay, within here. Min and max expect a list of values. So by giving it a column, I'm providing it a list of values. If I gave it a table name, that wouldn't work. If I gave it a single value, that may not work as well, okay? So then the last piece of number one is to find the total number of items that are present in this table. So in order to accomplish that, I'm going to make use of a third function. That one is count. And count can handle either a list of values or a result set, okay? So if I wanted to count the result set, that would be an asterisk. If I wanted to count a list of values, I could include unit price here as well, just to make sure they both work. Let's do them both. So I'm going to call this one count of column, and then we'll call the other one count of table, just to see what we get. All right, and as expected, we get the same result. So really you only need to include one of these two lines, either line or 3 or 4, but I wanted you to see both here. All right, so I'm going to copy and paste this back over to number 1 and take a look at number 2. So for each item, we want to know the average quantity ordered per order, all right? And then we're going to round that average down to a whole number, okay? So let's start with finding out our quantity ordered per order. We got to figure out where that would be. All right, so I'm going to start with order. Let's see if that gives us a quantity ordered. Oh, I need a from, don't I? Here we go. All right, and this is going to be order, kind of like a receipt information, right? So really what I'm looking for is the quantity ordered, which is going to live with the relationship of an individual item line, okay? So the relationship between a receipt and the item on the receipt. All right, so that is order details is going to be the associative entity that handles that relationship. All right, so in order details, I get an item ID and an order ID kind of as I expect, but then that's where I've got that order quantity, okay? So I'm going to be working with this order quantity here, and I want to know the average quantity ordered, okay? So the average number for each item, okay, that's been ordered. So in order to accomplish that, I'm going to use a group by clause, okay? So I'm going to select everything from order details. We'll leave that alone for now. I'm going to add the group by, and I want to get my groups based on item ID, okay? So if I put in item ID here, I should get unique values for item ID, okay? So we can see they only appear one time, even though they appear multiple times in the table. And that allows us to calculate a total or an aggregate value, use those aggregate functions for each group. So for all the times that item 6 was ordered, what was the average quantity ordered? In order to find that, I'm going to use the average function, and I'm going to average the values that are in the order quantity column. Okay, go ahead and run that. Nice. Okay, so this boils that down to a single calculation, a single average, right, for each item. Now, again, our column name isn't super friendly here, so I'm going to change that with an alias. Let's call it average quantity. So that gets us most of the way towards 2. The only other piece we have is then we want to round that average down to a whole number. And give the column an appropriate name. We did give it an appropriate name, but we need to round this value down. We can see here we've got some repeating values. So we want to round it down to a whole number. If we were just rounding, we could use the round function, okay? In this case, we want to round to a whole number, so it would make sense to use the floor function because we always want to round down, okay? Think of it like an elevator that if it can't get up to the next floor, it's going to come crashing back down. Okay, to the previous floor. So we're going to floor that, and so then we should see all ones. Yep. All right, so that gives us our answer to number 2. I'm going to copy and paste that one over and take a look at number 3. Here we want to provide a list of items and total number for those items that have sold. Include only items that have been purchased in more than one order using the having clause. And make sure to give all columns an appropriate name. We want to provide a list of items and the total number of those items. So we're going to start with our order details table here again. So I'm going to select everything from order details. And the reason I'm doing that is because I care about items that have actually been purchased or ordered. So I need for this order quantity to, or for this record to exist. If there are items that haven't been ordered, I don't care about them. So I'm going to start with the order details table, okay? And what I want to do here is find a total order quantity, or the total quantity that has been ordered of each item ID over time. All right, so once again, I'm going to group by item ID. Make sure we get this down to a non-duplicated result. All right. But this time, instead of averaging out order quantity, I want to find a sum or a total. So add all those values together. Cool. And that gives me a total of all of those items that have been ordered over time. Let's call it number ordered. Is that a little friendlier? All right, so now we need to include our having clause because we want to make sure this number ordered is more than 1. Looks like they're all more than a 1. We want to make sure that all of those were not ordered in a single order, okay? So there's multiple rows present in the table, all right? So sweaty feet will give horrible. Having has to come after our group by. So I'm going to add my having clause. And here I want to count specifically the rows, okay? So I'm going to use an asterisk there. And I want that to be greater than 1. Okay, so now we know we've had multiple orders for all the items that are displaying. And we are showing those total number ordered. All right, so that should get us to an answer for number 3. I'm going to copy and paste that over, and let's take a look at number 4. Now we want to find the average quantity of items ordered overall. Okay, so before we found an average by group, this time we want to find it for the entire table. So I know I'm going to be working with the order details table because I want that quantity ordered. And I know I want an average of the quantity ordered, so order quantity. And this will give me an average for the entire table as opposed to a group. So if I don't specify a group, I get the entire table. All right, so just over 1 is our average quantity ordered. I'm going to grab this query, paste it into my VS Code, and let's move on to number 5. So now we're going to find the average quantity of items ordered per item ID and use the roll-up operator to find the overall average. Okay, so here we've got just over 1, and I'm going to add the roll-up operator. To do that, I'm going to add a group by roll-up here. Like so. All right, so I see here then that I get an average order quantity by item ID, okay, because I've specified that in the group by, but then I also get a total. This last one would be a total. And what I wanted to point out here is the roll-up operator, what it's going to do is find an average of averages. Now, because these are also close to 1, in this case, our table average is going to be the same as our average of averages, but that's not always the case, okay? Rollup is going to take an average of these averages that we have found by group, okay? And so that could be a skewed number here if we take that average of averages. Sometimes having a disparity between that will tell us something about the data, so I wanted to point it out to you. Okay. So that is our answer for number 5. I'm going to copy that one over and move on to number 6. There's been a shipping delay for the orders we shipped in July. Oh no. So we want to find all the orders shipped in July. And to do this, we're going to use the between operator with the toDate function. Okay, so let's start with finding where our order dates are. Take a look at what we have to work with. So let's start by looking at our orders table. I'm going to select everything from orders just to take a look. All right, so we want to see orders where our shipped date is between July 1st and July 31st, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to order by that shipped date. And I think I'll put it in descending order so that I can see the most recent. All right. And here I can see that, all right, we've got 5 rows that were shipped in July. So that gives me an idea of how many I should get when I use my where clause to limit the rows returned. Okay, so now instead of ordering by, I want to limit my rows. So I'm going to use a where clause, and I want the shipped date column to fall between, and I'm going to say July 1st, and it's 2014 here, okay, and July 31st of 2014. Now, in some database management systems, this will work, all right? Oracle, however, is pretty picky about dates. So we're not going to have luck with just putting dates in as strings like this. We're going to need to convert them to date objects. And Oracle has, it's pretty hardly typed. So if you're familiar with any programming, it's more like Java than it is like Python, okay? So we're going to have to use those to conversion kind of functions. In this case, we're going to use toDate. Now, the way toDate works is it will take in 2 arguments, okay? So in the parentheses here, we are going to have 2 arguments. The first one is going to be the thing we want to exercise conversion on, the thing we want to convert. So we're going to give it a string that we think should be a date, all right? And then we're going to tell it the format that the conversion should take place in. So here I've got my string that I think should mean July 1st, 2014. And I am actually going to add zeros in here just to make life easier, okay? Because then I can tell Oracle that I want the format of this date to be month, month, day, day, and then year, 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 year. Now, if you've seen date functions in other database management systems, I hope you have at this point, you know that this is probably similar to a lot of other database management systems. It is. So capitalization in those date formatting strings matters, okay? Single quotes and double quotes matters, all right? You want to use single quotes inside this function. If you want to know more about the codes for that date function, there should be a link to date documentation or documentation in your book, okay? And then if you want more information, don't hesitate to go out and Google toDate Oracle, and you'll be able to find the Oracle documentation really easily that tells you what all of those formatting strings are. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same thing here with our second date. I'm going to convert it to a date object. All right, and I'm going to use month, month, day, day, year, year, year again. So I need to make sure I've got exactly that format. That's why I add the zeros. Okay. And now if I run this, I should be comparing dates. Oh, and I've got too many year digits here. Let's try again. There we go. All right, and then I get my 5 rows returned, which is what I expect, okay? So I have found all of our rows that we need to target for that shipping delay. So that's our answer to number 6. But we're going to use this query now to get a list of the customer names and phone numbers that were affected by the delay, okay? So in order to get that information, I want to go to the customer table. And I can see here in my result set, I've got customer ID. So what I'm going to do is make this query into a subquery. I'm going to focus first on just getting these customer IDs. And this should give me a list of the customer IDs that I care about. Excellent. All right. So then I'm going to add a blank line before my query. And what I'm going to do is I want to select all the information from customers where the customer ID is in the list that is developed by my subquery. And I'm going to indent these lines to make it easier to read. Make sure I close my parentheses at the end. So I've got matching parentheses. See, these ones match, these ones match. Semicolon at the end. Go ahead and run that. All right, so that gives me the full customer table, full rows, right? Okay, for all the customers that I care about. The question says, I really want a list of their names and phone numbers. Okay, so I am going to take their last name, concatenate that to their first name with a comma in between. And I'm going to call that customer name. And then I also want to show their phone number. All right, that gives us a nice result. Last kind of polished piece, I might want to put these in order by the customer name. We can add that pretty easily down here with an order by clause. Nice. All right, so that looks like a nice workable result for us. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that over for number 7. All right, looking at number 8, we want to create a list of all the orders by ID and the date they shipped. Okay, we're going to call it shipped date. If a shipping date is not provided, we want to display the phrase not yet shipped. Okay, so this is a bit of a conditional function that we want to do here. So first, let's focus first on getting the results we want, and then we'll focus on that conditional piece. Okay, so first we want to see a list of orders by ID. So I'm going to select everything from orders to start. All right, and what I want to see is the order ID and the ship date. So I'm going to limit those. All right, but now if I put these in order by that shipped date, I think I remember from our previous queries, some of these, oh, and I need to put them in descending order so I see the most recent. Some of these have not yet been shipped. So that shipped date, yep, is null for those values or for those rows. Rather than showing just the hyphen to represent null, I really would like to see the phrase not yet shipped for this kind of report, okay? In order to do that, I can use a function here to say, show the value of shipped date if it's there, and if it's not, I want you to show this particular string. A function that does that is the NVL function, okay? So what it's going to do is show this shipped date, and then if there isn't a date present, if it's null, I want it to say not yet shipped. Okay, and then if I run that, I get an error, okay? And that's because a non-numeric character was found where a numeric character was expected. This is telling us we have a type mismatch, okay? So essentially ship date is being forcibly converted to a number, and we're expecting a string, all right? So in order to fix that type mismatch, I'm going to use the toChar function, which is going to force ship date into a string. Okay. And I can specify how I want that to come out. So I'm going to use my date format that I used before, because that's very nice and readable for us. All right, so now when I get my dates, they come out in that format that I expect. And if there is not a date present, I get the value, the string that I wanted, which is not yet shipped. Last piece of this column title is no longer ship date. It's kind of messy, so we're going to change that, give it an alias here. Much better. All right, so I'll copy and paste that back to my VS Code. And let's look at number 9. So we want the average quantity of items by item ID. We did something similar to this earlier, right? So I'm going to go to the order details for that. And then we're going to want to find the average quantity by item ID. So I know I'm going to want to be grouping by that item ID. Start with just getting a unique list. And then we'll add in that average order quantity. All right, so we've got our average quantity by item ID. And now for number 10, this is the answer to number 9. So we'll copy and paste that over. And then for number 10, we're going to use that query above to write a select statement that shows customer information for customers that order more than that average. So customers that place bulk orders is kind of what we're looking at this as. So we want to identify customer information for those orders. In order to do that, we first need to identify orders, okay, where the order quantity is larger than this. All right, so what I'm going to do is come up here and I want to select everything from orders, right, where our order quantity, well, from order details, because that's where order quantity lives. I want to select everything from order details where order quantity is larger than this value. Now, it can't just be larger than the value overall. We need to know where it's larger than the value for the item that the order details row is relevant to. Okay, so I'm going to need to be able to connect my inner query to my outer query in some way in order to make that connection, right? So this row of order details, I want to select each row of order details. And for that item ID, I want to know what the average is so I can know if the order quantity for that row is greater than the average for that item. All right. In order to do this, I'm going to give both my inner and outer tables an alias so that it's easier to keep track of. So I'm going to call my outer one D1 and my inner one D2. Okay. And I want for this inner query to happen where my item ID of my result set is matching only the item ID of the outer query. Okay, so I'm going to replace this group by clause with a where clause. And I only want to see item ID, rows where the item ID is equal to the item ID of the outer clause. And that should give me an average order quantity, okay, for the item. Like let's say I'm going through and my first row I'm going to look at is item ID 6. What this subquery is going to do is get all of the item ID equals 6 rows, okay, because that's what my where clause says. And then it's going to find the average order quantity for that. So I'm going to take out this item ID piece. I only need the average for this comparison to take place. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. And what we should see is that all of these are more than 1. The order quantity is more than 1, okay, because we know all our averages were around 1 or between 1 and 2. So that's a good, accurate result. Now, from there, we want to work towards getting customer information because that's what the question asked us for, is who are the people who are placing these larger orders? So using this order ID, we should be able to get to orders and then from orders to customers, okay? So what I'm going to do is we're going to build that out with query. We can join. Let's see if we can join first. I'm going to write a query where I join customers and orders, and then we'll use that to build a subquery with the one we've done. Okay, so I'm going to start by selecting everything from customers where we want to get, and I'm going to join that to orders because I know once I get to orders, I can use the order ID from this query we already wrote to bring those together. Okay. So I'm going to join that to orders. I'm going to call customers here C and orders here O, okay? And I want to bring those two tables together based on that customer ID. So customer ID is in orders, and I want that customer ID to equal our customer ID in customers. So in this view in Apex, I can select just a single query and run that. And this should give me a nice result set where I'm able to track a customer and their information based on an order ID. Here we've got order IDs. Nice. Okay. So then I really only want to see these rows, right, where the order ID is in this list. So I'm going to make this a subquery of this in the where clause. All right. So I'm going to bring these two together now. So I want to see this result set, these rows, where the order ID is in a list that is generated by this query. So I'm going to indent that in. I don't want to select everything from this any longer. I just want the order IDs. Okay. And then I need to add another parentheses, so I get matching parentheses. These are the parentheses for my first subquery. These are my parentheses for my next subquery. All right, let's run that. And yay. So I've now got a result set that shows me that customer information. Now, really, I only care about customer information. This is still showing some order information in there. So what I'm going to do is just show the results, or the rows. I'm just going to show the columns that come from the customer table. To do that, I can use my alias that I defined for customers and say I want to see everything from the customers table. So c.customers table, and then everything is the asterisk wildcard. And that should allow us to just get those columns back. Yay! So no more order information, just the customer information for customers who have placed large orders. So that'll be the answer for number 10 there. I'm going to copy and paste that over. If you have any questions about the queries that we put together in this activity, please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, that should give you a nice, solid place to start for the assignment and a completed activity that you can upload to Canvas for credit. All right, I'll see you next time.